Hello, everybody, and welcome to MangaPod. This is a weekly podcast. I was going to say broadcast, and then I tried to turn it into podcast, and it turned into a not word. It's a weekly podcast in which we all get together after we've read all or part of a manga, and then we talk about it with friendship, love, and lots of spoilers. This week we read Innocent. What was it? Chapters 1 through 41?
Yep.
Yeah. And, we're gonna do the thing. I'm all off. I don't know what happened to me. I got all
Dodger, you got it.
I got this.
Unfortunately,
thank you. Unfortunately, our fearless leader Erin is gone tonight, but don't worry, she's not sick or anything. She's having fun with her boo. So excellent, Erin. I hope you have a fantastic night. So I'm filling in. I'm Dodger, and I do the anime and I do the video games, and I'm delighted to be hosting tonight. We've also got one of our normal co-hosts as well as a very special guest. If you guys would like to introduce yourselves.
my name's Lou. I'm from Lou Talks Anime. I also do the anime. I would like to do the video games on the Twitch a little bit more.
You should.
Yeah, like my laptop. Like, all right, gonna buy a desktop. I've been planning it for months now, and I've saved up enough money. Now I just need time to build something, which is great.
It's an undertaking, so I don't blame you.
So like once I get set up, like then it's gonna be fun. I would like to start streaming, but that's for later. That's later time. This manga time. It's MangaPod. What's up? Lou Talks Anime.
Yeah. And our very special guest, Pause and Select. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Joe. I'm from Pause and Select, and I make videos on anime.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I got.
Sick. I love it. Perfect. Short and sweet. Also, your picture is fantastic. I'm very happy to have a big fluffy cat on MangaPod today. All right, cool. So, the way that we normally run this show is we like to give you guys a spoiler-free description or a summary of the manga that we read so that you kind of know what you're getting yourselves into, and then we're going to go one at a time and tell you whether or not we think that this manga is worth your time. Again, in a totally spoiler-free sort of a way, so that, you know, you can still leave and go read the manga and not feel like you know everything that's going to happen in the manga. But at that point, we will be going into a spoiler section. We'll give you a big ol' heads up so that you know when spoiler section is starting, and then we're going to discuss it super in depth. So, Joe, if you would read our description for the lovely
All right,
viewers.
yeah. Sure, no problem. It's like 2 paragraphs. Easy.
Great.
Okay. In the 18th... Oh, I already messed up.
No,
okay.
you got this. You got this.
Oh, okay. In the 18th century, seeking freedom and equality, the event that became the starting point of modern French society, the French Revolution, began. Oh, Jesus Christ, there's a comma splice. There was one more protagonist that lived within the darkness, Charles-Henri Sanson. He was the 4th generation family head of the Sanson family and executioner of Paris. This is the history of him nobly facing the harsh fate. And there's an ellipsis at the end, so it's a trailing thought.
Fate. ...
Oh, like it's up for us to answer that question. This is like a deep philosophical thing.
Absolutely. You know it.
Yeah,
Yes.
This is my anime list. You know, this is 100% intentional.
Mal is so hit or miss with the way that they do their descriptions. It's like sometimes they're great, and other times you're like, wait, I didn't want to know everything that happens. I didn't want to know the full... All right.
I'm just glad this one is short. Like, short descriptions,
Quality. It takes a special person to be able to write a short description of a manga. Cool. Well, then let's do our spoiler-free recommendations. Do you guys think that people should take the time to read this manga or not?
I'll go first.
Yeah, go Lou.
All right, so
Hit us.
I love Innocent. I read it in two sittings. The only reason why it was 2 sittings is because I had work like 5 hours away from the conclusion of my first sit. And like first time I sat down and read this manga. And like honestly, like I was just like enthralled by just the violence and how graphic it was and how much it reminded me of other things that I really enjoy. So It was just like it was a combination of like joy and rage because like I was mad that there wasn't like I was forced to stop is what I'm trying to say. It's
Yeah.
just like I wanted to keep going.
Hmm.
But like the joy of the experience of just, constantly cycling through the material. Super age restriction, like maturity
It's a
warning.
very violent manga. It's
Don't
about executioners, guys. It's like,
basically.
yeah.
But I mean, like it's not even the graphic violence. I mean, it's not even limited to the graphic violence. It's the
I was
like
gonna
double
say
sex. Like
there
there's
are
a
some
ton of sex.
titties.
Yeah. There's some butt stuff.
There
Like
is. There was a panel of butt stuff, and I was like, oh my.
but you know what? We'll get into that when we get into the spoiler section. But bottom line, I really enjoyed Innocent. It's by the same mangaka that did Koku no Hito, which is that
Which we
rock
also
climbing.
read.
Yeah, we read it earlier this schedule. Everybody loved it.
Mhm.
It's a very different manga, but like I could kind of see like the last little bit of Koku no Hito that we read for MangaPod, and this little section of Innocent, which we read about half of the first run of Innocent.
I could
I
see it
could
in the lips.
a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's good. Read it.
Yeah, I'll absolutely echo that. I didn't know what I was going to be getting into with Innocent, honestly, and it's always fun to read a manga that's based off of people who actually existed. And if you go and look up these people, not saying that I did, hypothetically, if you were to go and look up these people and what they actually look like, you'll be like, oh, mangaka took some liberties. But it's really cool to read something that's following a family that actually existed during a major historical event that definitely happened. And the artwork I think is perfect for it because it's beautiful art that is constantly contrasted by how awful everything is. So it works really, really well, I think. And this is not a happy manga at all. This is a very
Now, what are you talking about, Dodger? This is like the happy
it's
song.
not happy. Look, it's not a happy manga. But it's very good. And I also was upset that I needed to stop. So Joe, what are your feels?
Okay, no spoilers. This is a very sort of Rabelaisian work. So if anybody's familiar with the work of François Rabelais, which is he's a Renaissance humanist who wrote around, I believe, in the mid 1500s, and his main work that he's well known for is Gargantua and Pantagruel. And it's actually very fascinating, sort of the sentiment that's really being captured here that Sakamoto is going for here, because this is a very sort of it captures a particular mode of writing and reading that the Russian formalist Mikhail Bakin ends up calling sort of the carnivalesque, and the idea that there is this sort of grotesqueness, but at the same time, this grotesqueness is not simply for the sake of being horrific grotesque, but simply, but also for the sake of being exciting or in some ways destabilizing. And Bakhtin talks about that particular idea of the grotesque, and I think this is actually really applicable in something like Innocent here. This idea, this juxtaposition of all these horrific things, these terrible actions, but it's telling the story of these sort of people leading up to this absolutely fundamental period in human history, that it's such a large discombobulation of society in such a fundamental and foundational way. And I think that really underlines throughout all of this manga, and you can really see it in sort of how it portrays these major contrasts. How the manga format really plays to this chiaroscuro depiction of these characters in light and dark spaces, but at the same time, how it really quickly jumps from scene to scene. But at the same moment, there are these. You can see it very much in the first chapter, how it goes through these sort of moment-to-moment transitions in its panels. And so in this context, it feels very much like sort of a quasi theater more so than a manga. And so, yeah, I would absolutely recommend this.
Mm. You sound so learned, Joe.
What?
Our friend,
What?
our friend Joe here is your PhD candidate, right?
Yeah.
Sick. That's awesome. I'm excited to
but
discuss this manga with you.
But that doesn't matter. That shouldn't matter.
Cool. Well, you've heard it from the three of us. We all absolutely loved it. I'll be honest, I didn't take the time to ask Erin whether or not she read it or if she enjoyed it, but I would be curious because this was basically like Innocent, aka Sad Bishonen, the manga. So I feel like
plus
with that alone.
Murder.
Yeah,
Like
graphic murder and crying Bishonen. That's like the two major things that happen in this. But yeah, so if this looks interesting or sounds interesting at all to you, we hope that you take the time to go and read it. This is the point at which we are going to go into spoiler section. Please, please, please do not spoil anything past chapter 41. Don't ruin it for us. Don't ruin it for other people. And if you don't want to hear literally everything that happens in these first 41 chapters, then don't ruin it for yourself. You can always come back and rewatch this later on youtube.com/happilyerin. You can take your leave now and start reading this manga immediately. It's totally up to you. I'm not your mom. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Henry's God? Probably. I don't know. Executions are God. Executions are God.
Executions are God. I had a really hard. Can I just say, as like a precursor, yes. I had a really hard time keeping names straight in this.
Oh yes, they all have the same last name. Some of them have the same first name.
Yeah, because all their first names are like hyphenated, right? And then it was like whatever the final bit was is what they were referred to as, and I was like, who are you? Who are all of these people? Cool. All right, guys. I know we went into it a little bit, but what were your expectations when going into this manga? What did you think you were gonna get out of it? What kind of a story did you think it was going to be? Was it exactly what you hoped, or was it different?
All right, I'll go first. Mm-hmm. So when we kind of set up this manga on the schedule, it was on recommendation, but not a lot of detail provided within the context of that recommendation, and I hadn't read the mangaka's work prior to that, so we went through the experience of reading Koku no Hito, and I expect like that set my expectations for Innocent, where I expected it to be a manga that had a beautiful art style and tackled some complex themes, and presented a very well-rounded characters, because that was my experience with Koku no Hito. This was a very different experience to Koku no Hito, and contrasting both of them has kind of like put me in this position where if I didn't know they were by the same mangaka, apart from a couple details, like specific details in the art, I don't think I would have pegged it as being by the same person. Same. Because they're just so different in terms of how they present their characters. The vast majority of the visual aesthetic is very different between both manga, between both of those manga. But like taking Koku no Hito aside, my expectations were that it was going to be or present interesting characters in a very beautiful way, and that's what we got. Though this beauty in and of itself was a beautiful depiction of the grotesque, kind of like piggybacking off of what Joe was mentioning in his spoiler-free recommendation. Like, it was just a very grotesque visuals that were just violence perpetrated on like individual characters for chapters, and almost in one case a volume at a time. It was great.
Yeah.
The poor horse boy.
The poor horses.
Yeah, them
It's
too.
just like, God damn. They're just like, please rip this man apart. And they're like, I can't. Yeah. I didn't expect to be reminded so often of Berserk. It had so much of a Berserk feel for me. Um, and again, like I said earlier, I loved that just everything was gratuitously beautiful, right? Like all of the characters, I did look up the way that these people looked in for real's life. Like the paintings of them, they're all just really normal looking dudes, right? Like none of them were super pretty. But I think
They're
that
also a lot fatter.
a lot, yeah, a lot larger. But I think that the mangaka took a lot of liberties that way because there is something really striking about seeing these people that appear very beautiful or frail and having them interact with really grotesque things. It adds like a strange, sad, melancholy element to it. The fact that the main character is so just like delicate looking, and doesn't want to be an executioner and sobs every time he has to kill somebody, and yet this is what his life is amounting to, right? Like we know, just historically, we know that he's going to be the executioner of some major players, and I'm really excited to see how that plays out. But yeah, I thought that it was going to be a lot gentler than it was. I didn't think that it was going to have as much violence in it, and I'm glad that it did because I think that it worked so well. But yeah, Lou, because we read Koku no Hito, I wasn't really sure what to expect because I was like, oh, it's a historical manga, but the other one is like modern day. Okay, interesting. And it had some definite Berserk feels for me, which surprised me.
Like for me, I would say it was for Koku no Hito, it felt like shonen characters in a seinen plot environment.
Mm-hmm.
This took any semblance of shonen and just threw it out the window. It was
Yeah,
100 through and through a seinen manga. I'll say, like, you drew a parallel to Berserk. I would draw the parallel to Evangelion. Like, I love Eva, and Henry, the main character, reminded me a lot of Shinji, at least in places in the early parts. Specifically with how naive Henry is, even in the latter portions of the reading, where he was still like kind of guided by the hands of others, but also like living with this ideal that he like it's not something that he's gonna have to do forever. In other words, like Henry's goal is to basically just end everything, or end executions in France. Like that's what he wants to do. And that reminds me of just how naive a character Shinji was and how easily he was to manipulate. Which it wasn't until like that last little bit where we saw some real growth in Henry's character when he saved his younger sister from his grandmother.
Yeah, near the end we saw him go against her quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And I was glad for that. But Joe, what were your expectations before you started reading? Had you read this before?
So I don't remember which site it was, but I remember coming across the sequel to this, Innocent Rouge. I remember coming across the sequel to this, Innocent Rouge, quite a while ago, and I read the first 5 to 10 chapters, not knowing that there was a prequel to this. And I was so absolutely confused by what was going on. I assumed it was an in media res situation where it was going to have an arc where it'll tell me the backstory of these people.
Right.
But
I've definitely done that before.
This makes a lot more sense now. It is really interesting, though, Dodger, that you mentioned the comparison to Berserk, because there is a very sort of, well, I guess before I continue, what comparison are you making between it and Berserk? Like, what is the connective tissue you're seeing?
Oh, art.
art?
The way that the art is presented feels very Berserk to me. Yeah.
Okay. Because I can definitely see a connection to Berserk, not necessarily through its art, but through a fairly common thematic element in some of these types of stories, which is the idea of the festival. Because Innocent
Yeah.
peppers its major executions with festivals and how they sort of bring things down. But it's really fascinating you made that comparison to Berserk because the first instances we start to see the demons, if we're just going to call it that, well, what do they call the moment that precedes the arrival of Godhand? Well, they call it festivals. And the whole idea here seems to be that this structure, the society, as it's constructed in some particular way, there is this cataclysmic, yet at the same time, this sort of quasi-euphoric event where everything comes crashing down and everybody is equalized, whether painful or not. And so that was the connection between Berserk and Innocent that I thought was really fascinating. And it was really fascinating you made that.
Yeah, that's really true because Berserk has so many moments in it where it's like Innocent being completely overrun by like weird animalistic behavior, and we saw a lot of that in Innocent as well.
And even within Innocent, there was a line of dialogue that I think it was Henry that said something when he confronted his uncle about why the execution was taking so long, and how he kind of brings up this idea that the executions bring humanity close to demons. That the whole point of this execution is to show the people of France the death of a demon, and the longer the execution takes, the more they get drawn into this world of demons. So it brings out the darker side of their nature and makes them more demon-like, which kind of like reinforces that parallel that you guys have been talking about.
Yeah.
So Joe, what other points really stood out to you, at least relative to your expectations?
So I am not very familiar with the French Revolution historically. I'm more familiar with the social theory that came about as a result of the French Revolution. But I think a really important thing that we should really consider here in Innocence, like Sakamoto obviously very much did his research, but I think a really important element here when we're talking about the story of particularly what was his name, Charles Henri Sanson, is that a lot of what we know about him comes from his compatriots. And a lot of what we know about his compatriots is that they were sort of working under a very specific idea, and that is the idea of where the subject exists. So what I mean by that is that, so I have a quote here. I have a quote here from the Comte de Clermont-Tonnerre, where he says, "Professions are either harmful or not. Those that are constitute a habitual infraction that the law should prohibit. Where they are not, the law must be consistent with justice on which it is based. We have simply to overcome a prejudice. Whatever the law requires is good. It requires the death of a criminal. The executioner simply obeys the law. It is absurd that the law should say to a man, do that, and if you do it, you will be abhorrent to your fellow man." And I think how Henri Sanson is depicted in this manga really gets at a fundamental question here, which is that, well, he's socially placed into this position where there is no consideration of the subject. And what I mean by that is that he is born into a family of executioners. The title of the executioner itself is it's looked at with such disgust with society, but the act itself has a particular quality of it that sort of transcends everything else. I mean, you look at this this is a story about the guy who ends up executing a considerable amount of nobles. He's got like a body count of like 3,000 by the end of his life. And in some weird, twisted way, it's a sort of a very Cartesian perspective. It's a very sort of French post-Revolutionary War perspective that we're seeing here, but it's presented in such a visceral manner. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, man. Man, I'm trying to think of where we should even start with this.
I mean, let's go. I guess easiest way to tackle this would be to go character by character, because I feel like the plot goes or the plot of Innocent goes hand in hand with the characters, because it's Henry's journey and his interactions with different people and how those interactions play out. So
yeah, so we've talked a bit about Henri. And it's listed in not just the manga, but in many different articles and like biographies about him, that the biggest influence on his life wound up being his grandmother, who we saw a lot in the manga. How did you guys feel about her? I mean, aside from the fact that she's fucking awful, but like, how did?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. Like,
I found her to be confusing personally.
Yeah.
Because she very obviously took on the role as the like head of house, right? But she refused to call herself that because she wasn't a man. And yet she was like the person who made every decision for every member of the family, man or not. Her little daughter goes up on the stage and she literally tortures her daughter for going where a man should go. And it was just such a bizarre contradiction to me, this idea of like, but you're making decisions for every man in your life. Why do you think that, I don't know, like why does she not think that she's overstepping her boundaries, but every other woman is, you know?
See, when it comes to how she I think would interpret that, it's more along the lines of she's just either repeating or regurgitating what is the expectations of the men in the family. It's about preserving the family more so than her enforcing or really being the person that's in position. She's essentially someone that enforces the law rather than really dictating what the law should be. So kind of like how Henry and all the other executioners, their role in society as a whole, where they are executioners that just follow the law. They don't necessarily create the law.
But didn't she like in the flashback, didn't she like fuck up a bunch of dudes in order to make sure that her son became the next executioner? Right? In that flashback, when she brought her son in and they were like, he's very young, we've already had 2 other people like on retainer to take over this job from your husband, so, you know, thank you very much for your service, but you can leave now. And then the next thing that we saw was like 2 dudes bleeding. We saw a big note that looked like, and it's hard to see because it's manga and it's black and white, but like seemed like it might have blood on it, of somebody who wrote up saying like, yes, this little kid can become the executioner, I guess. And I was like, okay, so she also is super down to just like fuck people up in order to make sure that the family stays in good standing. I don't know, man.
Well, I think there's 2 ways. There's 2 ways we can look at her character. The first one is the first one is I'm going to go with the complex one because that's going to be a shorter answer.
Okay.
The first one is, if we take a look at Lacanian psychoanalysis, psychoanalysis by Jacques Lacan, the French psychoanalysis, her actions would be considered a sort of manifestation of what he calls les objets petita. And the idea is that sort of to conceptualize a particular way of controlling the imaginary through the symbolic form, you essentially exude those particular things onto objects or persons. The idea, for instance, like if you want to, for instance, show yourself off as someone who is talented, your career goals might be a position that makes you look talented. And so in this context, if we consider Lacanian psychoanalysis, we might, for instance, think that she might want to consider herself powerful by having sons whom are powerful, and thus exerting her control over those children, in turn, gives her a power.
Okay.
The second one, which I think...
Well, sorry for cutting you off, but I mean, at the same time, while she's doing that, she's also contradicting her desire for power, her I guess what we can presume to be her desire for power, by just degrading just women in general. So I like is hypocrisy perceivable within that type of analysis?
Well, so one, yes. And two, the answer to that would probably be that she doesn't really conceive of any way to yield that power except through the symbolic, which is the language of and how that power manifests. So what it means, in short, is that this might be the only way that she really understands on how to wield that power. And I think that's really important when we get to a character like Marie, because Marie essentially represents a way to completely destabilize that wielding of that power. Right. You know, that's why she's in such a tiffy when Marie steps onto the platform. The second, and I think is probably more sensible response, is that recurring throughout the Tsun-tsun family they're a clan. They're a clan in the context that everybody is, like, all the Tsun-tsuns are executioners. They are, it's like a family of blacksmiths, but instead of actually making weapons, they're using it to execute people. And I think what's really important there in the conception of the word clan is that the idea is that the clan surviving supersedes the individual surviving. And so you can see this idea recur throughout all of the family members. Charles himself, Charles takes up the position and then he acts in a way that constantly reaffirms, we have to do these things to make sure that the Tsun-tsun family continues, because there's no other way the family will survive. Jean-Baptiste, Charles' father, has a very similar sentiment. When we look at the torture scenes, for instance, the whole idea surrounding all of the torture scenes of the family members, of the children, it all comes to, well, you don't disobey the system, because if you do, then that harms the clan.
Our family will come to ruin, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so where Marie falls into this is that, once again, she threatens to destabilize that idea because she completely bucks the entire trend. Oftentimes she does what she wants. She says she does what she wants. And so she, as the singular subject, it's a very Enlightenment idea. It's a very Cartesian idea that you as the single subject supersede the things around you. It's sort of very reminiscent of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, which whom interestingly actually gets referenced later on in the manga.
Yeah, let's talk about Marie. Dude, like that's such an old trope, but I thought that it was really sad in this, like the whole scene with her like choking her brother and saying you should just die. Like, this whole family doesn't want either of us to exist because they're both being forced into positions that they hate and they wish that they were one another. And Marie is just like such a brutal, visceral character, like the way that she views the world. The way that it left off, seeing her older, I was like, fuck. I want to read more so
I want to read more. Like, I loved her design. And just seeing that those elements of her character, seeing that in someone that now has the blessing to pursue the life of the executioner, like she had been granted that blessing by her older brother. um I'm curious to see how her character is going to develop in later chapters, because I feel like um her character is going to have to regress at some point, because with age comes maturity, and with maturity comes a change in perspective.
Yeah.
So I would hope that the mangaka would at least um, plan for that, because I don't see that character staying brutal without it seeming cheap.
Right. Well, it's
I
like
read right up until the end.
No spoilers, please.
I
Yeah.
won't say anything.
Yeah, it does say anything. But that was another thing that I thought was confusing about the grandmother, that she would brand her granddaughter in a place where people are definitely gonna see it. I was like, wouldn't that bring more weird talk about your family than just like acting like it never happened? I don't know. That was strange to me too. Like the fact that that's now such a huge part of her, that she has the name branded on her chest.
Well, I think that's a sort of a symbolic gesture that essentially locks Marie in. The moment she's been branded, you can't take that away. So if Marie represents a character that is essentially trying to enact the Enlightenment idea, which is a self-sufficient singular body, then to brand Marie essentially means it essentially emphasizes that she herself has no power, no real power, because the moment people see the branding, they know.
But it's not. But she never. It's not like she doesn't want to be part of the family. If anything, she wants more than anybody else to be in that position, to be an executioner and be part of like their lineage. But her gender restricts her.
Well, yeah, but I think, well, let's make a distinguishing question here. Do you think there is an appreciable difference between her wanting to be part of the family of executioners or her wanting to be an executioner?
I don't know.
Because there's a possible anxiety, I think, that the grandmother might be feeling, which is that she might want to be an executioner, but she might not want to be a tsun-tsun.
But that's never been implied. Like, never in our reading was it expressed that she didn't want to be an executioner in the family. It was just that if her life in this family was going to be that of a noble-born woman and she wouldn't get to do anything else, then she would rather just die.
Yeah, like they kind of alluded to her being okay with the idea, or not okay, but appreciative of the idea of being connected with the family, with her kind of acknowledge, or when she gets on a stage, and the fact that was it I don't remember if it was her or if it was Henri that said that she had the right to be on that platform because of her blood. So it's kind of reinforcing that idea that she
That's
is
true. I totally forgot
inextricable
about
from.
that.
Yeah, she can't be taken away from the family, or that she is a part of the family. The family is a part of her.
Dude, at that
So
moment, I was like, oh my god. She's just like, you fucking shut up. I'm the one with actual Sasson blood, bitch. I was like, damn.
yeah,
Oh, shit.
but I mean, I will give Joe credit, because the idea that maybe she just wants to be an executioner independent of her family is also a real possibility, but I don't think we've had enough of an experience with their character to really make that determination.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like what we've seen of her is, yeah, that very defining moment on the stage, but also like she definitely utilized everything that the family had to offer, even if it wasn't offered to her, right? Like she listened in on lectures, she read books, she did all kinds of stuff and utilized this vast collection of knowledge that her family had in order to hone her own skills with no one knowing. I don't know. Up until this point, at least, I don't feel like we've seen any indication that she has anything against the family. She has something against the role that she's being asked to play, and she doesn't want to be that person.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction.
Okay.
I think a challenge with her character is that they're within the first 40 chapters there hasn't been an internal monologue for Marie.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. We kind of seen her through. Is his name Charles or is it Henri? I think it's Charles, right? The main
It's
character.
Charles Henri tsun-tsun.
Yeah.
Okay, both. Charles
Yeah, but
Henri.
like, and then the older brother, or not the older brother, the dad is Charles
That's
John
Baptiste.
Baptiste.
Yeah. Well, either way, MC Kun.
Yeah.
We've seen most
Okay.
of the world through his eyes, right? So yeah, I would love to kind of get an idea of what some of the other characters are thinking. What did you think about the whole, like, since this is what spawned everything with Marie anyway? What did you think about the whole, like, power struggle for becoming, Monsieur de Paris, with the uncle? With the uncle, fuck, what was his name?
Uncle douchebag that got the weak horses because he's an asshole.
Yeah,
That guy?
Uncle Douchebag. How did we feel about Uncle Douchebag and sort of how he tried to make a play for that role?
I mean, see, I think ultimately it falls on the execution of that play, because if it would have been successful, if it would have been if he would have gotten the result that he would have wanted, so for example, the execution not being drawn out for like an hour and a half, the way it was, then I think it would have been I don't think I would have perceived him as a douchebag or as much, because he did take steps to trying to kind of placate the more sensitive side of Henry, in other words, of trying to limit the suffering of his friend or acquaintance. But I don't know, like the fact that he made that play, it feels kind of cliche, because it's essentially just the younger child aspiring, or not aspiring, but hoping to receive the affection and adoration and acknowledgement of his mother. Like that's his character arc. And I feel like it was a little shallow. I would have wanted to see him go a little bit more deranged, because like, yeah, at some point, he kind of seems dissatisfied with the way the execution is progressing. But I feel like if he would have slipped into madness a little bit more, and we could have seen more of his transition into being a monk, I think that would have made for a more interesting.
I would have also liked to see kind of an in-between point between him being like, I'm gonna be an executioner of Paris, and then suddenly being a monk. Yeah, I did think that he was a good sort of foil to Henry in that storyline, though, because Henry has spent his whole life sort of walking in this darkness that he hates, right? Just being very lonely and not wanting this life at all. Meanwhile, his uncle wants nothing more than to be exactly what Henry is, right? So it was interesting to have that going on, while at the same time, once push came to shove, Henry was the only one who could get the job done. Like that had the poise to be able to do it. And I thought that was kind of an interesting progression with that story, that like this person wants to be an executioner, so like wants the prestige of being the executioner of Paris so bad, but he couldn't handle it. Like his body couldn't handle it,
Now, there's I'm surprised that we haven't really talked about this at all, but what do you guys think about the executions that we saw? So for example, the first one that lasted a couple of chapters that really caught my attention was that initial decapitation scene.
Oh my god.
Where Henry misses. We just get him smashing that sword against his friend's skull over and over again until it's just a mess, and how we don't really see
I was
a
like,
lot
baby,
of the
stop.
contact. Yeah, no, he's just going at it, but like I think that they had like different or interesting or different visual representations of what it would look like for the blade to go into the skull. Like I think um then they have one of it like cutting into fruit or something. I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah.
Like this manga made use of a lot of visual metaphor,
Hmm.
and
I
it did
really
it did
liked
so
it though.
effectively, and yeah,
Hmm.
like I enjoyed it.
What do you think,
Well,
Joe?
a lot of these executions. So in regards to the I so well actually I'll just throw in my tidbit, I guess, in regards to the executions. In regards to the executions, they're sort of, as far as I understand it, they're sorted out by class, if I recall correctly, because nobles oftentimes were the ones who got beheaded. Robbers were the ones who oftentimes were placed onto the wheel, and commoners were oftentimes hung.
Hmm.
Um, so it really sort of tells the character that's being killed little bits about themselves. Um, in regards to Nicholas, the uncle, I'm wondering if the sudden shift between Nicholas being this executioner and then becoming a monk so quickly, I wonder if it may be because perhaps the mangaka did not find sufficient historical information to expand on his character.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's possible. Oh, and to sorry for interrupting. Burgerito in the chat correct offered a correction that it was cutting into a pomegranate, which I
Pomegranate
think was the name.
bursting.
Yeah, I think that was the name of the chapter too. So there we go. All right, Joe, you can continue.
Oh, no, I wasn't really going to say much after that. I was
Well,
just going to say, I was going to say, because, you know, this manga is very much selling itself on a certain historicity or historical authenticity. And so, you know, all the Bishonen character designs notwithstanding.
Right.
And so if you hit a moment where you find out there's a gap of knowledge that you can't really fill, the question becomes, well, do you fill it in yourself through interpretation? Or do you just back off on the subject entirely? And my guess is it's totally possible that Sakamoto decided, well, I'm just going to back off because if I fill in the gap, then my reader's going to question other parts where I might have filled that gap in as well.
Right.
hmm. I
I
mean,
did.
it also could have been an instance of just for lack of time,
Yeah,
because there's just so much information being conveyed every chapter. I don't think like tying up a side story that the character already went through his arc. We already know what the conclusion. Just kind of like getting him out of the way so we can make room for now Marie, who is now becoming a more prominent figure in the manga. So I think that may have also played into it. Like I don't know how much information is really available on Nicholas.
Dude, speaking of the wheel, I love the weird little nun girl that keeps showing up, and we
Mhm.
already know from the first time we saw her, we got a little like blurb next to her that was like she eventually gets executed by our main dude. um, did you miss that?
No, I caught that, but you just like bringing her up did remind me of something that I thought was fascinating when I was comparing this manga to Koku no Hito.
Okay.
Koku no Hito is a sports manga, right? But the way these executions were being commentated by people that were witnessing them was more like a sports manga than Koku no Hito was.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Did you see what he did with the leather strap? He is such a kind executioner. I hope one day that I may be executed by him. Don't worry, girl. You will. We already know. We already know.
It's all about like that exposition through narration and through character dialogue, and it felt very like a reading innocent. It's not a sports manga, guys, but it felt like a sports manga in
For
places.
just a minute, yeah.
well, I
Um,
mean, like if you consider execution a sport, it might be.
I mean, in was it 18 or 19th century? Oh yeah, 18th century France. If it could have been, I don't know. I'm not a history guy, kind of.
All right. Well, we're like a couple minutes from the end here, so let's touch on art before we wrap up. How'd you guys feel about the art? I know we've talked about it a little bit, but
I liked it a lot. like,
I thought that
like
was gonna be. I liked it. It wasn't great, but I liked it.
no. I liked it. Like, the Bishonen character designs being torn apart. Like, for example, the guy that kissed Henry. Seeing what happens to him, just
What
I don't
had
know.
so much more of an impact because he was gorgeous, right? Yeah,
Yeah, like
that's how I felt too.
it feels like
You're just like, holy shit, that guy got fucked up.
I don't know. It's like not only does that, like that element of change in the characters, like because of these beatings that they're taking, not as, only is it more visible, but I feel like I don't know, like it adds a certain flair to the presentation that kind of matches the whole aesthetic that one would associate with the nobility pre French Revolution.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Is like that's such this sort of obsession with how you look is such a French idea with the nobility as well. So, I appreciated that they were all just like too beautiful in a world where things are getting like specifically bodies are getting destroyed all over the place, right? And like being turned into something grotesque instead of beautiful. I thought that worked really well. And just the detail was crazy. But
Yeah.
Joe?
Well, I thought my understanding, or at least my interpretation of why these characters were always so were always so pretty is because when we look at Damien, the attacker, he's also drawn very pretty. My assumption was always that like these characters were drawn very pretty to distinguish them from the masses in which they sort of are backdrop against. Because if you look at all the characters that exist in the background, if you look at the characters in the crowds, you look at the people in the slums and all, even if you look at the nobles as they're presented, the no-name nobles, they're pretty generic. They're kind of gnarly. They're kind of nondescript. I'm wondering if the constant sort of Bishonen style is an attempt for Sakamoto to distinguish characters so we actually know who's who at what specific moment. The moment you come across a character who looks pretty, you're just like, oh, this is probably someone
Main
who's actually important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
maybe.
you look at the historical portraits of these people, they don't look that great.
Dude, I want Casanova to come back. Why the fuck was he there? He was there for like a split second. There's got to be a reason why they introduced him and not just for him to be like, don't you feel that sex and violence are quite similar? Let us bone while the execution goes on. Like, if that's the only thing he was there to do, that's fine. But it's just like, really? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, like I don't need a reintroduction of that character if it means like, just massive amounts of gore. Because honestly, in terms of like the visuals, whenever it was gore that was segueing into some abstract visual metaphor, like that's what made me happy. That was my favorite part of the manga more than anything. That and that badass like future like flash forward that we saw Marie at the very, very end.
Yeah.
Like those like all of that was my favorite. Or like when they started talking about, or when Henry started like having his little internal monologue where he was thinking about like, oh, we're all just parts of this of the king, and like how like it was presented by a bunch of bodies with a crown and a sword as Damien was getting ripped apart. So like I don't know, it's just some of these visuals were just really eye catching.
That's you know where that's from, right?
Mm-mm.
That visual.
The king consisting of bodies.
No. What is it?
That's from Thomas Hobbes. The Leviathan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a few years.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Lou. The idea of the Leviathan is really sort of ironic when it's being used in that very specific situation, because the idea here is that Hobbes is essentially saying that so Hobbes is responding to sort of the Rousseau, well, he's not directly responding, but the idea is a sort of a response to the Rousseauian social contract, where the idea that the government protects us and in turn we serve the government. That is a basic social contract. However, Hobbes sort of adds the dimension that sort of without a state of man, we're stuck in a state of nature, and a state of nature really sucks, and that's why he says life is nasty, brutish, and short. And there's a particular irony in Sakamoto using the image of the Leviathan, because the Leviathan image is essentially supposed to say, well, the state consists of all of these people, and its power is only wielded when these people act collectively to avoid the state of nature.
Right.
However, the problem here in that specific moment where that image is utilized, it's not in a state of nature, it's in a state of man. And so there is this perverse distortion of the state of man that is being used. And I think that Sakamoto was really trying to emphasize that sensation through that very specific metaphor. It's an absolutely genius use of the image, I think. And it's really great you mentioned that, Lou.
And bringing that or referencing that image specifically, not that it's happening in this story, but specifically that the story is happening during the French Revolution. I think that everything just connects really well. Because isn't this period of French history like really rooted in the emergence of humanistic ideas?
Yeah, so the French Revolution is considered by a lot of people to be one of the most important events in human history, because so before, particularly when we get into the idea of the subject, should I just like stop talking, because this might be a little bit.
How long do you think?
I don't know, I can compress it as fast as I can.
Compress it.
Okay.
But I'm interested. I do want to hear it.
Okay, so during the medieval era, the main idea of the human as a subject, so a subject and subjectivity, is about a question of whom are we subjected to? So whom do we go to understand the sense of being of ourselves? Predominantly, that has been the church. We are often a subject to God. What happened as a result, so when we got into the Renaissance and the introduction of humanist thought, the subject began to shift. The most famous utterance of the humanist thought is Descartes, Rene Descartes' cogito ergo sum, which is, I think, therefore I am, and therefore the sense of subject comes from inside of me. We sort of shift then into Rousseau, which is sort of the state of the pure person that gets affected by the world around us. So as we get to the French Revolution, the humanist idea begins to dominate, and that completely destabilizes the church and the state as sort of these subjects, as sort of these dominant means of creating subjects. And so what happens after this French Revolution is now we have these splits. We have these splits of subjected to things. And that's where we get into the idea of fields, oftentimes major fields of being subjected to things. That's where we got sort of the major flourishing of metaphysics, as well as the introduction of a really important subject, sociology. Sociology draws its influences from the French Revolution because it's a study of society, la société. And so as a result of that, we could really call sociology and the study of sort of societies as we understand it today as sort of a modernization of what was French social theory post 1789. And it really didn't stabilize until around probably, I would say, 1850s, but depending upon who you talk to, it might not stabilize right up until the end of the Second World War for the French. And so it's absolutely fascinating as a time period, and it's completely essential because of how it radically changes how sort of social theory is considered. yeah, that was as close as I can get to compressing.
I liked
That
it.
was great. It was
Yeah.
great.
Man, I feel like I'm learning so much from you, Joe. Um, cool.
Okay.
Well, let's all give our final thoughts and ratings. Typically, it's out of 10. Joe, you do whatever feels right for you.
I'll go first.
Yeah,
I'll
go for
be
it.
the person that sets the bar. I'm gonna give this a 9. I feel like we covered a lot of ground in terms of the story. Um, this first run of Innocent is 99 chapters. We got about halfway through the story, so like the next time we revisit it, we could totally just finish it, which would be great. Um, that said, I love the art. The setting is unique, which in and of itself makes this entire read completely refreshing because the majority of the time, like we're reading manga either in fictional settings or we're reading them um, based in Japan or even fictional settings that are based in Japan. Like this is completely removed from that, and I find that within manga, um, there isn't enough exploration of potential or different settings. I'm not going to go into why that might be the case. Um, Maybe it's a sense of familiarity that the mangakas have. But that aside, I love this manga. I think it's definitely worth reading. Now, whether this score dips or not really depends on how Marie's character arc really plays out. Because I feel like Henry is really transitioning into a at this point I feel is transitioning to a point where he could be maybe a mentor to Marie, but I don't know. This is just me speculating. But yeah, 9 out of 10 I feel is it's a fair score for this manga. The art is fantastic, and I couldn't put it down.
Mhm. I was also gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I thought that it was just really, really solid. The artwork is fantastic, and I did not want to put it down. I'm gonna just echo everything that Lou said. Um, I think it's a definite read. It's very gory. There's some sex stuff in it, so just keep that in mind. Maturity warnings, but um, I thought that it was a fantastic read, and I'm really excited to finish it.
One last thing because we
Mm-hmm.
kind of talked about it in the pre and like
Oh, the
spoiler
butt stuff.
the butt stuff. So, Henry is his dad thinks he's a fucking failure. All
Mm-hmm.
right, because he won't just get on the fucking platform, right? So Henry goes to see, goes to talk to his dad, but his dad is like having sex with his mom, and his dad notices that and like notices that he's like peeking through the door, so he jams a thumb up her butt.
Yeah, and she's super into it.
Yes, yes.
I was like, this is so weird. But when that was happening, I was like, at least like they're both really enjoying this. Like, like she's having a great time. He's having a great time, even though his son is watching. Weird, but I was like, if she's into butt stuff, then power to the French.
Again, another thing is like the dad he just wouldn't stop. He's just like, no, I must sow more seeds.
Yeah,
So
I
he's
know that.
just
I
like,
know
no,
that we just got done, but like, go take
let's
a
go.
walk, drink some water, and then I'll see you in 5, and we'll do round 2 because I need another son, ASAP. I was like, damn.
Yep.
Yeah, he's playing a wide game.
Joe.
Um, um, I so after I read the 41st chapter, I read a really interesting article, which was written in '95, I think now, by Arthur Applebaum, which is Professional Detachment, the Executioner of Paris, which talks a little bit about sort of how we might understand Sanson and the Sanson clan. It's a very interesting article. If anybody is interested in that, it's behind a JSTOR paywall.
Of course.
um, but with that in mind, I would say 10 out of 10. It's wacky, it's crazy, It's got a lot of asses. It's
Yeah.
got a lot of boobage.
Hmm.
It's just this nonsensical soup of French continental theory. It's very French. It's a very French manga. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. We all loved it. We think you should definitely read it. Although, if you watched all of this and now you know everything that's going to happen, shame on you. You should have left before the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. How dare you? Yeah, if you enjoyed MangaPod, you should check them all out on youtube.com/happilyerin. But before we go, we're going to read the summary for the manga that we will be reading next time. However, I will put some random blanks in there while I'm reading it, so you guys get to guess. Hattori Chise is only 16, but she has lost far more than most. With neither family nor hope, it seems all doors are closed to her. But a chance encounter began to turn the rested wheels of fate. In her darkest hour, a mysterious blank appears before Chitose, offering a chance she can't turn down. This blank, who seems closer to demon than human, will he bring her the light she desperately seeks, or drown her in even deeper sorrows? Go.
Sagi got it.
Sagi got it? Hell yeah. Ancient Magnum Waifu. Yep, that's the one.
Yep.
Ancient Magus Bride is what we are going to be reading next time. We will be reading chapters 1 through 20, volumes 1 through 4, with Mega Moeka. So that'll be super fun. I've been very, very excited to read that. Yeah, so hopefully you will tune into the next MangaPod. Let's all shout out our stuff and tell people what we do and where you can find us. I'm going to start off by telling you guys that you should absolutely go and follow Erin on everything. She's our fearless leader and she's lovely. You can find her on youtube.com/happilyerin, Twitter, happilyerin, Instagram, happilyerin. She did the unified branding. She got it. She does anime stuff, weeb stuff. She's got an adorable little baby. She does some mental health stuff. She's great, and we love her very much, and we hope that she's had a lovely night without us. You can find me on my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/dexteritybonus and on youtube.com/pressheart2continue. I'm at dexbonus on all the social media, and I do anime and video game stuff and just generally have fun, so I hope that you'll come and hang out with me. Lou?
My name's Lou, and I'm from Lou Talks Anime, and you can find me on youtube.com/Lou Talks Anime now, where I occasionally make anime-related content. Sometimes I'm proud of it, like what was a good video? Like my video on Funewamo, that was a good video. Sometimes I'm not very proud of it, like that one time I made a parody song of Little Yachty's called like Minnesota, but with like anime references. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's garbage, but I always have fun, which is kind of why I do YouTube. Twitter, Lou Talks Anime, Instagram, Lou Talks Anime. And yeah, let's just have fun. Just chat about this weeb shit. Good times. Joe?
If you listen to me ramble and you're just like, wow, this guy's a pretentious asshole, you can check out more of my content at Pause and Select. It's www.youtube.com/Pause and Select for real, because Pause and Select was already taken.
Dang it.
And you can support me on Crunchyroll by crunchyroll.com. /Linus Tech Tips. Use the code for 10% off or whatever the hell Crunchyroll gives out. Don't use that. That's not a real code.
But if you want a real code, crunchyroll.com/MangaPod, where you can get 30 days of free anime.
Wow, free anime.
It's the
best. Joe, if it makes you feel any more like calm in your heart, pretty much everybody while you were educating us on things was like 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10 knowledge drops. Love it. So we enjoyed having you very much.
It was great, Joe.
There's
I learned a lot. It's cool.
Somebody is just going to be all like, d'ici c'est un problème, je français, et d'ici c'est ne pas l'histoire de France. And I'm just like, that's great.
Our one French MangaPod viewer is gonna be like, the fuck?
This is all wrong.
All right,
Cool.
Joe. What I'll be sure to do is I'll send you a screen cap of that, and like you can print it out, and it'll be great.
Yeah,
I'll
you
let
can
you
frame
all.
it. It'll be great.
I'll put it on my wall.
Yeah, perfect. Great. Well, thank you so much for being our super awesome guest. Thank you, everybody who watched. Again, you can see every MangaPod that's ever happened at youtube.com/happily_Aaron. We also have a subreddit, and we are going to be putting together the next round of manga that we're reading. So definitely go to the subreddit if you have any opinions on what we should be reading. We have a thread there, as well as the pinned thread at the very top, which tells you all of the reading for the rest of this section, which goes up through June or July.
It's up to the very, very end of June.
There we go. So yeah, thank you all so much. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Laters. Goodbye.
Goodbye.